A splash of cold water hit her face. Gasps filled the room. The white manager smirked, holding the empty cup like it was a trophy. To him, she was just another black woman, someone he could humiliate without consequence. She stood frozen, drenched and silent, every eye in the cafe on her. What he didn't know was that her silence wasn't weakness. It was power waiting to strike. And in less than 10 minutes, his world would collapse. Tell us in comments, what would you do if this happened to you? Her name was Maya, a woman who carried herself with quiet grace. She wasn't the kind to draw attention, but wherever she went, people noticed her warmth. She worked as a community organizer, spending her days helping others find their voice, even when hers was often dismissed. To most, she was just another face in the crowd, a kind, hard-working black woman who minded her business. But those who truly knew her saw the strength she carried, the kind of strength born from years of endurance. That afternoon had started like any other. The cafe was buzzing with noise, filled with customers rushing in and out, sipping their coffees, tapping away on laptops. Maya simply wanted a moment of peace, a break from the weight of her busy schedule. She found a small table by the window, set her bag down, and opened her notebook to jot down ideas for her next project. To her, it was nothing more than an ordinary stop in her day. But ordinary moments have a way of turning into something unforgettable. Behind the counter stood a manager with a sharp suit and sharper eyes, the kind of man who believed the uniform gave him power. He carried himself with arrogance, dismissing customers with a glance if they didn't fit the image he thought belonged in his cafe. And when his gaze landed on Maya, something inside him twisted with disdain. Maya didn't notice at first. She was too focused on her notes, her pen moving steadily across the page. But the tension was already building, quiet and unseen. A storm was brewing in the most unexpected place, ready to erupt in front of strangers who would remember it for the rest of their lives. What would you do if you were sitting there, unaware that someone's prejudice was about to change your entire afternoon? Before we continue, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. The air in the cafe grew heavy as the minutes ticked by. Maya kept writing, unaware of the way the manager's eyes lingered on her, scanning her like she didn't belong. To him, she wasn't just another customer. She was a problem, a disruption to the image he wanted his cafe to project. Every time she looked up, his glare was waiting, sharp and unwelcoming. It started small. He instructed a barista to clean the table near her, even though it was spotless, brushing close enough to make her uncomfortable. Then came the loud sighs, the whispers exchanged with staff, the deliberate clinking of cups right by her table. To anyone else, it might have seemed like coincidence, but Maya felt it, the hostility, the deliberate attempt to push her out without a word. She chose to ignore it. She had endured worse. She thought to herself, I won't let this man ruin my day. But the manager wasn't finished. Each act of quiet hostility built towards something louder, something public. Finally, in a moment that froze everyone in the cafe, he picked up a cup of water, walked over to her table, and without warning, poured it over her notebook and into her lap. The shock rippled instantly. Gasps, silence. The sound of water dripping onto the floor echoed louder than the chatter that had filled the room seconds earlier. Maya sat still, her clothes soaked, her notes ruined, her dignity attacked in front of strangers. The manager straightened his posture as if he had proven a point. His smirk told the crowd everything. He thought he had humiliated her into silence. But humiliation has a way of backfiring. Instead of shrinking, Maya simply placed her ruined notebook aside, her eyes locking onto his with a calmness that unsettled him. It was a silence so strong that made the manager shift uncomfortably, though he tried to mask it. Customers began whispering, pulling out phones, recording every second. The scene had turned into a stage, and the arrogant man didn't realize he was the villain of his own downfall. What none of them knew, what the manager could never have guessed, was that Maya wasn't alone in this world. In just a few minutes, a man would walk through the cafe doors. Not just any man, her husband. And when he arrived, the cafe's balance of power would shatter. Would the manager still smirk when he realized who he had just drenched with water? Or would his arrogance crumble the moment truth walked in? The cafe door swung open. The little bell above it chimed like the start of a new chapter. Heads turned, but Maya didn't move. She didn't need to. She knew that sound better than anyone. Her husband had arrived. He walked in with quiet authority, his tailored suit setting him apart instantly. There was something about him, the way people instinctively stepped aside, as if they sensed the weight he carried without knowing who he was. The manager didn't notice. He was too busy basking in his moment of control, too blinded by arrogance to see what was coming. But the silence in the room shifted. Customers who had been whispering now watched intently, their phones raised higher. They knew something was about to happen, something that would flip the entire script. Her husband, Daniel, saw her immediately. Drenched clothes, soaked notebook, the tension in the room. He didn't need to ask. His jaw tightened, but his face remained calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes from someone used to power, someone who didn't need to shout to be heard. He walked straight to Maya, gently pulling her chair back, his hand resting on her shoulder with a quiet reassurance. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, it spoke louder than anything. The manager scoffed. "Sir, we don't allow loitering here," he said, waving dismissively toward Maya like she was a nuisance rather than a paying customer. The crowd audibly shifted, gasps breaking the air. He had no idea who he was speaking to, no clue of the storm he had just invited into his own cafe. Daniel finally turned his gaze on her. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but the weight of it made the man flinch. Customers leaned forward, waiting for the explosion. Maya sat quietly, her dignity still intact, knowing the tables were about to turn. And then the twist. Daniel didn't introduce himself as her husband, not yet. Instead, he asked the staff one simple question. Who owns this place? The room froze. A murmur swept through the employees, their faces pale, their eyes darting between each other. The barista whispered something under her breath, and suddenly the manager's smirk faltered. Because Daniel wasn't just a husband, he wasn't just another customer. He was the CEO, the man who signed their paychecks, the man who held the fate of their jobs in his hands. And in that moment, the balance of power didn't just shift, it collapsed entirely. Viewers, what do you think happened next? Did the arrogant manager fall to his knees, or did he still try to fight back against the truth standing right in front of him? The silence that followed was heavier than the splash of water had ever been. The manager's smirk had vanished, replaced by a pale stiffness in his jaw. He looked around for support, but all he saw were customers filming, employees shrinking back, and Maya, still sitting with dignity, her soaked notebook laid carefully on the table like a piece of evidence. Daniel finally spoke, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the air. "You poured water on a paying customer," he said, his eyes never leaving the manager's. "You humiliated her in front of strangers, and you thought there would be no consequence." The cafe staff shuffled nervously. Some already knew who Daniel was. Others realized it as whispers spread. He's the CEO. The realization hit like lightning. This wasn't just any man defending his wife. This was the highest authority in the company. And the manager had just crossed the one line no arrogance could protect him from. The manager stuttered, trying to explain, trying to twist the moment into an excuse. She was disrupting the space. But his voice faltered as Daniel raised a hand, silencing him instantly. Then came the blow no one expected. Daniel turned to the staff and said, "Every one of you who stood by and let this happen, you're done," effectively immediately. Gasps rippled through the cafe. The employees froze, eyes wide, realizing their silence had cost them their jobs. The room that had once been filled with arrogance now buzzed with disbelief and fear. Maya rose slowly, her dignity intact, every step she took reclaiming the respect that had been stripped moments before. She didn't gloat, she didn't need to. The scene spoke for itself. The man who tried to humiliate her was now exposed, powerless in front of the same crowd he once sought approval from. And yet, as Maya stepped into the sunlight, she didn't think of revenge. She thought of the countless others who didn't have a husband with authority to defend them, who suffered humiliation in silence with no audience, no applause, no justice. This was just one victory in a sea of untold battles. How many more stories like hers would play out unseen, unheard, unpunished?